From humble colonial beginnings to a global superpower, the United States of America is a nation forged in a crucible of dramatic transformation. Its story isn't a linear march, but a series of seismic shifts, pivotal moments that ripped through the fabric of society, tested its ideals, and ultimately redefined its destiny. Today, we embark on a journey through time, exploring 5 such instances, 5 extraordinary turning points that didn't just alter the course of events, but fundamentally reshaped what it meant to be American, leaving an indelible mark on its soul and its place in the world. These are the moments etched into its very foundations, echoes of courage, conflict, and a relentless pursuit of a more perfect union. Prepare to witness history in the making as we uncover the stories behind these monumental shifts that changed the USA forever. Our first monumental shift takes us back to the sweltering summer of 1776, but the seeds of this change were sown decades earlier. The 13 colonies, burgeoning on a new continent, grew increasingly resentful of British rule. Taxes without representation, restrictive trade policies, and a perceived disregard for colonial rights fueled a simmering rebellion. Enlightenment ideals of liberty, self-governance, and natural rights circulated among thinkers and revolutionaries like Thomas Paine and Patrick Henry, igniting a fervent desire for independence. Tensions boiled over, from the Stamp Act to the Boston Massacre, each event a step closer to an irreversible break. The idea of separation, once unthinkable, began to crystallize into a compelling, if terrifying, necessity. The stage was set for a declaration that would echo through centuries. The Continental Congress, a gathering of colonial delegates, found itself at a crossroads. Independence was a radical notion, fraught with peril and the very real threat of war. Yet, the momentum was undeniable. On June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia proposed a resolution for independence. A committee was swiftly formed, tasked with drafting a formal statement. Among its members were John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and the eloquent Virginian Thomas Jefferson. It was Jefferson, at just 33 years old, who largely penned the words that would define a nation. His draft, infused with Enlightenment philosophy, articulated fundamental human rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was a revolutionary declaration, not just of independence, but of universal human aspirations, a promise to the world. After weeks of intense debate and revisions, the Declaration of Independence was finally adopted by the Continental Congress on July 4, 1776. This wasn't merely a document, it was a defiant roar against tyranny, a bold assertion of self-determination. When read aloud, it sparked celebrations in some quarters and fierce condemnation in others. For the American colonists, it transformed a localized rebellion into a struggle for nationhood. For King George III, it was an act of treason. This moment fundamentally changed the very idea of governance, establishing that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. It laid the philosophical groundwork for a new republic, forever altering the geopolitical landscape and planting the seeds of democratic ideals that would inspire movements for freedom around the globe. The United States was born, though its path to actual freedom was still years away. Fast forward nearly a century, and the young nation, born of unity, found itself profoundly divided. Our second transformative moment is the American Civil War, a conflict so devastating it nearly tore the country apart. Its roots were complex, but irrevocably tied to the institution of slavery. The South's agrarian economy was built upon enslaved labor, while the North industrialized and largely opposed slavery's expansion, though not always for humanitarian reasons. Differing interpretations of states' rights versus federal power, compounded by westward expansion and the volatile question of whether new territories would be slave or free, fueled decades of escalating tension. Compromises failed, abolitionist movements gained strength, and the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 on an anti-slavery platform became the final catalyst that pushed the nation to the brink of an unimaginable fratricidal conflict. The secession of Southern states following Lincoln's election plunged the nation into crisis. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina, marking the official start of the Civil War. What many initially believed would be a short conflict quickly escalated into a brutal, protracted struggle. Families were torn apart as brothers fought brothers, and former neighbors became sworn enemies. The North, with its industrial might and larger population, faced the formidable challenge of conquering a vast, determined South fighting on its home soil. Early battles, like Bull Run, underscored the grim reality and the immense human cost. This was more than just a war, it was an existential struggle for the soul of America, challenging its founding principles and forcing a re-evaluation of its very identity as a unified nation. As the war dragged on, its moral stakes grew clearer. President Lincoln, initially focused on preserving the Union, understood that the abolition of slavery had become a military and moral imperative. On January 1, 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring all enslaved people in Confederate territory free. This monumental act transformed the war into a fight for human liberty, allowing African Americans to join the Union Army and fundamentally altering the war's purpose. That same year, the Battle of Gettysburg in July marked a crucial turning point, a bloody Union victory that halted the Confederate invasion of the North. Combined with the fall of Vicksburg, which gave the Union control of the Mississippi River, these events signaled a decisive shift in momentum. The Union, though battered, was beginning to win, forever changing the trajectory of the conflict and the nation's future. The Civil War finally ended with Robert E. Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865. The cost was staggering: over 600,000 lives lost, countless wounded, and a South devastated. Just days after the surrender, President Lincoln was assassinated, leaving the monumental task of reunification and reconstruction to others. The period of reconstruction that followed attempted to address the wounds of war, integrate formerly enslaved people into society, and rebuild the South. It was a complex and often painful process, marked by both progress and bitter resistance. While the Union was preserved and slavery abolished, the legacy of racial inequality and sectional animosity would persist for generations. The Civil War irrevocably redefined American citizenship, federal power, and the nation's moral compass, leaving deep scars, but ultimately forging a new, more unified, if imperfect, nation. Our third transformative moment thrusts the United States onto the global stage in a way it had never experienced before. By the late 1930s, the world was a powder keg. Imperial Japan was aggressively expanding its empire in Asia. Fascist regimes in Germany and Italy were on the march in Europe, and a new global conflict, World War II, was already raging. The United States, having endured the Great Depression, initially sought to remain neutral, embracing an isolationist foreign policy. However, President Franklin D. Roosevelt recognized the growing threat, subtly preparing the nation for intervention. As Japan's ambitions clashed with American interests in the Pacific, particularly regarding resource-rich territories, tensions mounted. The stage was set for a confrontation, but few could have predicted the sudden, devastating catalyst that would irrevocably shatter America's isolation. On the morning of December 7, 1941, the tranquil waters of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, became the epicenter of an unimaginable horror. Without warning, hundreds of Japanese fighter planes, bombers, and torpedo planes launched a devastating surprise attack on the U.S. naval base. The air was filled with explosions, gunfire, and the cries of men as battleships were sunk, aircraft destroyed, and thousands of American lives were lost. The attack, meticulously planned and executed, aimed to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet, buying Japan time to consolidate its gains in Asia. The images of burning ships and desperate heroism flashed across the globe, leaving an immediate, profound shock. This wasn't just an attack on a military base, it was an assault on American soil, a brazen act of war that forever shattered any remaining illusions of U.S. neutrality. The day after the attack, President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered his iconic Day of Infamy speech to a joint session of Congress. His words, filled with righteous anger and resolve, galvanized a shocked and grieving nation. With near-unanimous support, Congress declared war on Japan, officially plunging the United States into World War II. The nation, often hesitant to engage in foreign conflicts, was now fully committed. From factories to farms, schools to neighborhoods, America rapidly mobilized. Men enlisted in droves, women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers to support the war effort, producing planes, tanks, and ammunition. The attack on Pearl Harbor didn't just provoke a declaration of war, it ignited a profound sense of national unity and purpose, transforming a hesitant nation into a determined global combatant ready to fight for freedom on multiple fronts. The entry of the United States into World War II following Pearl Harbor was a turning point not just for America, but for the entire world. The nation's immense industrial capacity and manpower quickly swung the tide of the war, ultimately leading to Allied victory. But the impact extended far beyond the battlefield. The war accelerated technological innovation, profoundly reshaped the American economy, and brought millions of women into new roles. More significantly, it permanently ended America's isolationist tendencies, establishing the U.S. as a dominant global superpower. The post-war era saw the creation of institutions like the United Nations, a new commitment to international diplomacy, and the beginning of the Cold War. Pearl Harbor thus wasn't merely an attack, it was the traumatic genesis of modern America's global leadership, forever altering its foreign policy and its standing as a major player in international affairs. Our fourth pivotal moment delves into the enduring struggle for civil rights, a battle for equality that stretched for over a century after the Civil War. Despite the abolition of slavery and the passage of amendments granting citizenship and voting rights, African Americans faced systemic discrimination, particularly in the South. Jim Crow laws enforced rigid racial segregation in public facilities, schools, and housing, creating a society where separate but equal was a cruel farce. Economic opportunities were scarce, violence and intimidation were commonplace, and the promise of liberty and justice for all remained tragically unfulfilled. This era of profound injustice fostered deep resentment and spurred early, courageous acts of resistance, laying the groundwork for a monumental movement demanding full equality. The nation's soul was still wrestling with its foundational ideals. The mid-20th century saw the civil rights movement gain unstoppable momentum. Brave individuals, often at great personal risk, challenged the status quo. Rosa Parks' defiant refusal to give up her bus seat in Montgomery, Alabama, sparked a transformative bus boycott, demonstrating the power of organized nonviolent resistance. Ministers and activists, led by the eloquent and courageous Martin Luther King Jr., emerged as powerful voices, advocating for peaceful protest and civil disobedience. Sit-ins at segregated lunch counters, freedom rides challenging interstate bus segregation, and voter registration drives galvanized communities across the nation. These grassroots efforts, fueled by unwavering faith and a burning desire for justice, brought the harsh realities of segregation into the national spotlight, setting the stage for a dramatic display of collective will in the nation's capital. The dream of equality began to feel within reach. On August 28, 1963, 250,000 people, black and white, young and old, converged on Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. This wasn't just a protest, it was a triumphant demonstration of unity and purpose, demanding an end to racial discrimination and economic inequality. Under a clear summer sky, the Lincoln Memorial became a global stage. Speakers like Mahalia Jackson moved the crowd with song, but it was Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech that etched itself into the annals of history. His powerful oratory, delivered with impassioned conviction, articulated the moral imperative of civil rights, resonating deeply with millions and becoming an enduring symbol of the American promise. The march was a profound turning point, bringing immense pressure on Congress to act and galvanizing support for landmark legislation. The March on Washington was a resounding success, playing a crucial role in the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 followed, dismantling legal barriers that had prevented African Americans from exercising their constitutional right to vote. These legislative victories, hard-won through decades of struggle and sacrifice, fundamentally transformed American society, opening doors that had long been shut. While the march didn't eradicate racism overnight, it marked a monumental leap forward, pushing the nation closer to its stated ideals. The fight for true equality and justice continues, but the March on Washington remains a powerful testament to the enduring power of collective action and Dr. King's dream, forever reminding America of the promise it must strive to fulfill. Our final pivotal moment brings us to a beautiful, clear Tuesday morning, September 11th, 2001. For most Americans, it began like any other day. People were heading to work, children to school, and the twin towers of the World Trade Center stood tall and proud against the brilliant New York sky. The internet was a burgeoning force, but the pervasive anxiety of modern security threats had not yet fully permeated daily life. There was a sense of relative peace and prosperity, a feeling that major conflicts were distant, a relic of the past. The idea of a coordinated, catastrophic attack on American soil seemed unimaginable, a Hollywood fiction. The world felt secure, predictable, and fundamentally changed from the chaotic 20th century. This serene backdrop made the events that unfolded all the more shocking, all the more devastating, forever altering that sense of security. At 8:46 a.m. Eastern Time, American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, followed shortly after by United Airlines Flight 175 into the South Tower. Then came American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon, and finally, United Airlines Flight 93, which crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after passengers valiantly fought back against the hijackers. In a matter of hours, nearly 3,000 lives were lost, including civilians from over 90 nations and hundreds of first responders. The images of the collapsing towers, the smoke, the dust, and the terror were seared into the global consciousness. It was an attack on innocent lives, on symbols of American ingenuity and military power. The world watched in horror and disbelief as the unthinkable unfolded, instantly shattering America's sense of invulnerability and ushering in an era of profound grief and collective trauma. The attacks of September 11th profoundly altered the United States and its place in the world. President George W. Bush declared a war on terror, leading to military interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq, and a global effort to combat extremist groups. Domestically, national security became paramount, leading to the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, and vastly increased airport security measures that forever changed air travel. Civil liberties were debated, and a new era of vigilance began. The attacks fostered a surge of patriotism and unity, but also sparked complex questions about surveillance, foreign policy, and cultural understanding. 9/11 irrevocably shifted America's priorities, its perception of threat, and its engagement with the world, creating a post-9/11 landscape that continues to shape global politics and daily life for every American. It was a day that changed everything. From the bold Declaration of Independence to the agonizing divisions of the Civil War, the global awakening of Pearl Harbor, the triumphant cry for civil rights, and the searing trauma of 9/11, these 5 moments are but chapters in the ongoing saga of the United States. Each one was a crucible, testing the nation's resilience, its values, and its capacity for change. They remind us that history is not static. It's a dynamic, unfolding narrative shaped by human choices, conflicts, and aspirations. These events underscored the profound responsibility of each generation to confront challenges, uphold ideals, and strive for a more just and prosperous future. The story of America is one of continuous evolution, a constant negotiation between its past and its potential, reminding us that its greatest chapters may still lie ahead, waiting to be written by the choices we make today.